From cockroaches crawling across filthy basements,
there they are there, in refrigeration. Oh, fucking hell. Oh my god. Oh no. Look at that!
to rotten seafood sitting in dirty water.
It's never ending. Just when I think I've seen enough, there's more. Look, dead. Decomposed, soft, dead. Oh, that's the snails.
These are the most disgusting kitchens in Kitchen Nightmares history. First up is a basement nightmare where thousands of cockroaches crawled everywhere Gordon looked, making his skin crawl instantly. Dylan's, later called Purnima, is one of the most disgusting restaurants ever shown on Kitchen Nightmares. In Season 1, Gordon Ramsay visited the place in New York City, and what he found shocked even him. From the basement to the kitchen, it was dirty, rotten, and full of pests.
What's that smell? What? What is that? Is that for rats or mice?
Food for the catch a rat.
So we have got rats here.
The basement was the first nightmare. It was crawling with cockroaches, thousands of them. Everywhere Gordon looked, the bugs were moving. Flypaper strips hung from the ceiling, packed with dead flies. The smell was terrible, and the whole place felt like it had not been cleaned for years. Instead of being a safe food storage area, the basement looked more like a dump.
Oh my god, look. There they are there, in refrigeration. Oh, fucking hell. Oh my god. Oh no. Look at that! Oh my god, look at them.
The kitchen was no better. Gordon opened the fridge and found moldy burgers, slimy green chicken, and piles of rotten vegetables. Nothing looked fresh or safe to eat. To make things worse, a half-rotten tomato was actually served to a customer while Gordon was there. The refrigerator, which should keep food cold and safe, was dirty and filled with spoiled items. It was clear that no one cared about hygiene. When Gordon tried the food, it was just as bad as it looked. He forced himself to taste some dishes, but the rotten flavors made him gag. Instead of serving tasty Indian food, Dylan's was giving customers meals that were unsafe and disgusting. The managers made the situation even worse. There were 3 of them, but none of them took control. Each one blamed the others, and no one took responsibility for the mess. Without strong leadership, the staff had no idea what to do, and the restaurant kept falling apart. Dylan's became known as one of the filthiest places Gordon Ramsay ever stepped into. The mix of cockroaches, rotten food, bad smells, and lazy managers made it unforgettable. This episode showed viewers just how dangerous and shocking a dirty restaurant can be. Dylan's was more than just a failing business. It was a health risk to anyone who ate there. But if cockroaches were disgusting, this next kitchen had grey meat so rotten that Gordon couldn't believe it existed. Fiesta Sunrise, shown in Season 2 of Kitchen Nightmares, was one of the dirtiest and most dangerous restaurants Gordon Ramsay ever visited. Located in West Nyack, New York, this Mexican restaurant was more like a health hazard than a place to eat. From the moment Gordon stepped into the kitchen, he could see the disaster. The food storage was shocking. Gordon found pork that had oxidized, turning a grayish color no meat ever should be. The chicken was slimy and unsafe to touch, let alone cook. Spoiled fish sat in the fridge, giving off a foul smell. These foods should have been thrown out long ago, yet they are still being kept and served to customers. It was clear that food safety rules were completely ignored. The kitchen itself was filthy. Cockroaches crawled through the space, making it impossible to believe that anyone would want to eat there. Cross-contamination was happening everywhere, with raw meat stored near cooked food and no clear system to keep things clean. The staff seemed careless, and no one was following proper hygiene. Even the menu was a joke. Instead of creating their own dishes, the owners simply copied a menu from another restaurant. Old branding was lazily covered up with stickers, showing no effort or pride in what they served. The food that came out of the kitchen was just as bad as the menu. Greasy, bland, and unsafe. Customers were not only disappointed, but also at risk of getting sick. Behind all this chaos were owners who didn't seem to take their responsibilities seriously. Fiesta Sunrise was not just suffering from bad food, it was being destroyed by neglect, poor management, and a lack of care. This episode shocked viewers because the problems were not small mistakes. They were major risks that could shut down a restaurant instantly. Rotten meat, cockroaches, and filthy storage are not things anyone expects when eating out. Fiesta Sunrise showed how dangerous a restaurant can become when owners stop caring about cleanliness, quality, and safety. It remains one of the most disgusting and unforgettable episodes of Kitchen Nightmares. While rotten meat was horrible, this Mexican restaurant's moldy vegetables were so slimy they made Gordon question his career. Mamaritas, featured in Season 3 of Kitchen Nightmares, is often remembered as one of the worst restaurants Gordon Ramsay ever stepped into. Located in Newbury Park, California, the restaurant was supposed to serve fresh and tasty Mexican food. Instead, it became famous for all the wrong reasons. The biggest problem was the kitchen. It was filled with moldy and rotten food that should have been thrown away. Vegetables were slimy, meat was spoiled, and food containers were left uncovered. The smell alone was enough to make anyone feel sick. Instead of keeping ingredients fresh and safe, Mamaritas stored food carelessly, allowing it to decay and spread germs. Storage practices were completely unsanitary. Raw meats were placed next to cooked food, and expired ingredients were still being used in dishes. Cross-contamination was everywhere, creating a major health risk for customers. It was clear that hygiene was not a priority for the staff or management. Gordon Ramsay was disgusted, pointing out that these practices could easily make someone seriously ill. The food quality matched the kitchen's condition. Customers were served bland, greasy meals that lacked any authentic flavor. Nothing tasted fresh, and many dishes looked unappetizing before they even reached the table. For a restaurant trying to compete in a busy market, this was a recipe for disaster. Part of the downfall came from poor leadership. The owner seemed overwhelmed and lacked the passion needed to run a successful restaurant. Instead of taking control, they allowed standards to slip lower and lower until the kitchen became a nightmare. Mamaritas never gained traction with customers, and it quickly developed a bad reputation. The dirty kitchen, the unsafe food, and the lack of effort made it one of the most infamous restaurants in the show's history. This episode is remembered as a low point in Kitchen Nightmares, not just because the food was bad, but because the kitchen's hygiene was so shockingly poor. Mamaritas stands as an example of how quickly a restaurant can collapse when owners fail to care about cleanliness, safety, and quality. If moldy food was bad, wait until you see what this seafood restaurant did to fresh shrimps and crabs. Oceana Grill, featured in Season 4 of Kitchen Nightmares, is one of the most shocking episodes in the series. Located in New Orleans, a city famous for fresh seafood, the restaurant somehow managed to serve spoiled, rotten food instead. Gordon Ramsay expected to see the best ingredients the city had to offer, but what he found was enough to make him shut down the kitchen. The seafood was the first disaster. Instead of fresh shrimps and crabs, Gordon discovered shrimp that were old and slimy, crabs that had turned milky and spoiled, and crawfish that were half dead. These ingredients were not only disgusting, but also dangerous to serve to customers. It was unbelievable that a restaurant in New Orleans, surrounded by markets full of fresh seafood, would stoop so low. The kitchen itself told the rest of the story. Gordon opened containers to find chicken breasts that were slimy and clearly unsafe. Marinated chicken legs sat uncovered, collecting bacteria and cross-contaminating everything around them. The smell was terrible, and the sight of raw meat stored carelessly showed that hygiene was not taken seriously at all. The fridge was another horror. Food was left without dates, making it impossible to tell what was fresh and what had expired. Raw items were stored next to cooked ones, creating cross-contamination risks. Instead of being a place to preserve food safely, the fridge looked like a breeding ground for bacteria. Things were so bad that Gordon took the rare step of halting service. He refused to let the restaurant serve another plate until major changes were made. He called in an exterminator to handle the pest problem and demanded a full deep clean of the kitchen. This was not just a quick fix, it was an emergency to prevent anyone from getting sick. Oceana Grill became infamous as one of the dirtiest restaurants Gordon Ramsay ever visited. With rotten seafood, dead mice, roaches, and careless storage, it showed exactly how a restaurant can fail when owners ignore the basics of cleanliness and food safety. But spoiled seafood was nothing compared to this fancy French place where Gordon found actual maggots crawling through ingredients. The Secret Garden, featured in Season 1 of Kitchen Nightmares, is remembered as one of the most shocking and disgusting restaurants Gordon Ramsay ever visited. Located in Moorpark, California, this French bistro was supposed to be elegant and refined. Instead, it hid one of the filthiest kitchens Gordon had ever seen. The problem started with the food. Gordon opened containers and discovered moldy ingredients, some crawling with maggots. Vegetables were left to rot, and meats were kept in unsafe conditions. The smell of decay filled the kitchen, making it clear that none of the food should have been served to paying customers. The storage practices were just as bad. Raw chicken was stored together with cooked chicken, creating an extreme risk of cross-contamination. This dangerous mistake could easily cause food poisoning. Gordon was horrified that a restaurant serving fine French cuisine could ignore such basic safety rules. The ovens were another nightmare. Instead of being cleaned daily, they were caked in thick layers of grease and burnt food. They hadn't been scrubbed in ages, and the filth was shocking to look at. Cooking in those conditions wasn't just unprofessional, it was unsanitary. Even the dining room, which should have been a pleasant space, was outdated and dusty. Decorations were old, and the overall look was tired. But compared to the horrors in the kitchen, the dining room was the least of the restaurant's problems. Things were so bad that Gordon actually vomited during his inspection. The mixture of mold, rot, grease, and maggots was unbearable, even for someone used to visiting failing restaurants. His reaction showed just how extreme the situation had become. The secret garden stood out as one of the dirtiest kitchens in Kitchen Nightmares history. Instead of offering guests a true French dining experience, it exposed them to rotten food, unsafe practices, and shocking levels of neglect. Gordon's visit revealed just how dangerous the restaurant had become and why it was on the brink of collapse. While maggots were horrifying, this next restaurant smelled so terrible that customers thought there was a dangerous sewer leak. The Seascape Inn, shown in Season 4 of Kitchen Nightmares, is remembered as one of the filthiest restaurants Gordon Ramsay ever visited. Located in Islip, New York, this family-owned business had been struggling for years, but nothing could prepare Gordon for the level of neglect he found inside. Even before entering the kitchen, the problems were obvious. The dining room had a horrible smell, almost like raw sewage. This foul odor set the tone for what Gordon was about to discover. Customers should never have to sit in a restaurant that smells like a sewer, yet the staff acted as if it were normal. The kitchen was even worse. Gordon opened the storage areas and found moldy vegetables that were soft, slimy, and clearly unsafe. Rotten meat was left sitting around, long past its expiration date. Containers of sauces were covered in mold, showing that they had been ignored for weeks. It was shocking to see food in such terrible condition still being kept in a professional kitchen. Food storage was completely unsafe. Raw meat was stored right next to cooked meat, creating a major risk of cross-contamination. This careless setup could easily lead to food poisoning. Gordon was disgusted that the chefs ignored such a basic rule of food safety. The physical condition of the kitchen only made things worse. Grease coated the walls, stovetops, and even parts of the ceiling. The buildup was so heavy that it added to the foul smell hanging over the restaurant. Clearly, the kitchen had not been deep cleaned in a very long time. What made the situation worse was the attitude of the chefs. Instead of showing concern for hygiene, they carried on as if nothing was wrong. Their carelessness proved that they didn't take food safety seriously, putting every customer at risk. The Seascape Inn episode shocked viewers because the problems weren't small mistakes, they were major health hazards. From moldy sauces to rotten meat and grease-caked walls, the restaurant was a disaster. Gordon Ramsay's inspection made it clear that the Seascape Inn wasn't just failing as a business, it was failing its customers by serving unsafe, disgusting food. If sewer smells were awful, this family restaurant had dead lobsters floating in tanks of dirty, foul-smelling brown water. The Spanish Pavilion, featured in Season 4 of Kitchen Nightmares, was a family-run restaurant in Harrison, New Jersey that shocked Gordon Ramsay with its filthy kitchen and careless food practices. Though it had been open for decades and was once a local favorite, by the time Gordon arrived it had turned into a health hazard. The kitchen was the first disaster. Gordon opened storage containers and discovered rotten lobsters left to die slowly in filthy tanks. Many of them were sitting in dirty, foul-smelling water, while others were already dead but still kept in the tank. This alone was enough to turn customers away, but the horrors didn't stop there. When Gordon inspected the refrigerators, he found raw food stored on top of cooked food, a clear case of cross-contamination. Chicken and seafood were left uncovered, collecting bacteria. Moldy ingredients sat alongside fresh ones, making it impossible to know what was safe and what wasn't. To make matters even worse, a pigeon was actually sitting inside the kitchen during Gordon's inspection, proof that pests were free to wander in and out of the restaurant. The sight of a bird in a food preparation area was shocking, and it highlighted just how little control the owners had over hygiene. The floors and cooking areas were filthy, covered in grease and grime. It was obvious that the staff had not done a proper deep clean in a long time. For a restaurant that claimed to serve quality Spanish cuisine, the kitchen conditions were shocking. Gordon was disgusted that food prepared in such an environment was being served to paying customers. The dining experience matched the poor kitchen practices. Dishes came out bland, greasy, and unappetizing. Customers were not only disappointed by the taste, but also at risk of getting sick from unsafe food. The restaurant had a proud history, but careless management and lack of hygiene had dragged it down. What made this episode unforgettable was the scale of the neglect. Gordon had seen many dirty kitchens before, but finding rotten seafood, cross-contamination, and filthy tanks full of dead lobsters was a new low. The Spanish Pavilion stands out as one of the dirtiest kitchens in Kitchen Nightmares. Instead of offering authentic Spanish flavors, it exposed customers to serious health risks. Gordon's visit showed how a once-beloved family restaurant had fallen into shocking decline. But floating dead animals weren't the worst part. At this final restaurant, Gordon did something completely unprecedented on television. Jay Willie's, featured in Season 2 of Kitchen Nightmares, was a failing restaurant in South Bend, Indiana, that left Gordon Ramsay shocked from the start. The place was so untrustworthy that Gordon actually asked a priest to bless the food before eating it, something he had never done before on the show. That alone showed just how bad things were. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Instead of using fresh ingredients, the chefs relied heavily on canned and frozen products, stripping the food of any real flavor. When Gordon inspected the refrigerators, the problems became even clearer. They were broken and not keeping food cold enough. Inside, he found moldy vegetables that should have been thrown out days earlier, and rotten meat that posed a serious health risk. No customer should ever be served food in that condition. The lack of care in the kitchen was made worse by the condition of the dining room. Tables and chairs were dirty, and the overall space looked neglected. A restaurant is supposed to welcome its guests, but Jay Willie's made customers feel uneasy the moment they walked in. Gordon was appalled by the combination of poor hygiene, bad storage, and cheap ingredients. The reliance on frozen food not only ruined the taste, but it also highlighted how little effort was being made. Fresh food could have helped turn the business around, but instead corners were cut everywhere. Jay Willie's is remembered as one of the most disgraceful kitchens on Kitchen Nightmares. From rotten meat and broken fridges to moldy vegetables and dirty dining areas, it showed how quickly a restaurant can fall apart when owners ignore the basics of cleanliness and quality. Gordon's disgust was clear, and so was the danger to customers. If you thought these restaurants were shocking, just wait. There are even more jaw-dropping Kitchen Nightmares moments out there. From cockroaches to rotten seafood, Gordon Ramsay has seen it all. Don't miss what's coming next. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more of the filthiest, craziest episodes ever exposed.